Welcome. I'm Frank Conkling. This is Panda Consulting's Parcel Fabric Workshop. And today we're going to look at splits and combines inside of ArcGIS Pro 3. And this is a little bit different from the way we used to do it in Pro. And it's just going to hit upon some of the changes that are occurring in 3. I recently had a client ask me, what's the difference between 2 and 3? Should I move? And I figure the easiest way to do this is to go ahead and just show you the changes and some of the things you want to talk about. Before we go any further, you'll see that on all the slides, there's a QR code. That QR code actually points to panaconsulting.com. So if you're looking for any information about us, who we are, what we do, please go ahead to the QR code and we'll move forward. All right. By the way, Chris at our office is also moderating. So if you're in attendance here and you've got any questions or comments or like anything you want to talk about, go ahead and put it in the chat window and we'll start talking with you about it. All right. Okay. So here then, it's just sort of a general overall outline for the changes that have occurred in Pro 3.x and what you want to think about, and I want to show you what these are and what impacts they have upon things such as the splits and combines that we're doing. All right. The biggest thing you want to recognize is that there's some structural parcel fabric changes inside of 3.x when you go and upgrade your parcel fabric. It depends upon whether or not you're upgrading it from 2.9 or 3.x. If you're upgrading it from 2.9, it doesn't necessarily put some of the new fields in, but if you're doing it from 3.x, it will go and put it in. So let's go in and look at this real close. All right. So if I go to the databases and look at my parcel fabric, all right, in here, again, it looks absolutely the same. And it will say that, in fact, this is a parcel fabric, a release 5, a version 5, and it's compatible with 2.9 and 3.0. But if I go and look at my parcel lines, for example, and look at the data actual structural design, I will see that there is a new field in here. And this field is called parcel or label position. Label position. And so what Esri has done is recognize that they've got a lot of new functionality in 3 related to the actual positions of the labels. They've also made several changes to things such as the label expressions themselves on here and what those label expressions say and the changes in those. The label position also goes and sets the position on it. And we'll go and experiment a little bit with this Reconstruct Boundaries function also. Those are the first things I want to sort of go over. So with the new label in here, let's go ahead and look at that and see what changes they made in here. So if I go to label properties, what you will see is that they have actually rewritten the entire arcade label expression. And I'm going to go and copy this to our notepad here so we can look at this a little bit better. And here is the new expression. So a lot of it will look the same, but a lot of it, there's some certain components on here. For example, there's this variable in here called show parcel type. Show COGOType actually will go and give you different labels depending upon whether or not your COGOType is set and what it's set to. So here's the next thing. If the COGOType is set as entered, it goes and just normally fills it in on there. If, however, it's set as computed, it goes and puts a plus or minus in here, and then it actually puts the value in here. All right. And if it's set as from geometry, it goes and actually puts brackets around the individual lines. So let's go and look at that. So if we go in here, we can see that this line is now being marked as being from geometry. And if I go in here and edit that line and take that line and make it not from geometry, but make it entered, you will see that, in fact, those brackets disappear. Now, if I go and tell it instead not to be entered, but from compute it, you'll actually go and see that, come on, it actually puts the plus or minus in front of it. So the new label expression goes and allows you to go and have information regarding whether or not it was entered, whether or not it was from geometry, or whether it was computed. And again, just to remind you of this, COGOType inside the parcel fabric is set according to where the COGO information was derived. So if the COGO information was derived as being entered or input from the mapper, it's assumed that that's really good parcel information. And it goes and will display it without any sort of delimiters around it. And you can rely upon that because that was entered from the plat or from the record document on here. However, if it was computed, that means that, in fact, the original value was entered. However, some function has been done and performed against it so that it's either been divided or split or something. And the software has taken the original entered value and prorated that so that you then wind up with this new computed value that's on there. And then finally, if in fact the value for the COGO information was inversed or taken from the geometry, it will then put it in brackets. If you're familiar with the new Traverse tool inside of Pro, you recognize that, in fact, on parcel lines, when I'm going and editing in here, if I just go and digitize, it goes and puts whatever I have digitized in brackets. So here I have brackets here for the distance because I just digitized them both. So it uses that same way of delimiting this as being, it's not a real value, it's something that was just calculated or something that you shouldn't necessarily rely upon. All right, so that's the first one, is the fact that, let me go in here, come on. I'm looking for my delete. Let's go and select that again. There you go. Let's undo that. All right, so sort of tells you that first part, which is the change in the labeling expression. The other change that you'll find is that there's now a much better consistency within the label expression for the parcels and the information that's on there. By default, it always goes and shows you, again, the direction. That is by default set to be true. Now, if you wish to change it, you can always go and change that to false. As you can with any of these, you can tell it, false on any of these values in here that have true, false on here, and set these flags, and it will have an impact on the rest of your label and what's going on from that point forward. However, you do want to be aware that on the labels now, because of that inclusion with 3.0 of that label position, we now have our label expressions are set up with 3 different labels, whether it's to the right side of the line, whether it's to the left side of the line, or whether it is shared between the lines. Now, in this case, we only have one line here, so we don't have a shared line in here, so that these are all set to be shared label expressions. But I want to go and show you that if I were to go in here and set this line, let's go in here again and go and set this line. And instead of being centered, we can tell it to be on the right side of the line. So again, it will go and put it above the line. Or, and by the way, that right side of the line, that was the way that the labels were positioned in ArcGIS Pro, or excuse me, in ArcMap Parcel Fabric. Left side of the line, it will go and put them left side of the line, or centered on the line, it will go and put it centered on the line. So the label expression and the positioning of the expression has now been modified, and it's a much more, not just complex, but a much more intuitive, a much better way of going and labeling the lines. And as you can tell, Esri is looking for us to stop using annotations, stop using even point labels, and move towards really rely upon the information that's stored on the lines and utilizing those. Okay, so let's look at one more thing that Esri has done. So that now with this, we previously would always have this problem in that we would have these lines that are split, and we would have one dimension for this, one dimension for this, and at the bottom, this is what's commonly been called the backlot issue. We would have we would go and replicate or duplicate those two on there. Well, now what we've got is we've got a different way of handling this, in that now we can go and have it automatically go and generate and to calculate whether or not these have correct information in here. So let's go ahead and zoom in here a little bit more so that we can see these labels on here. And let me go and select these parcels. Esri now has a tool inside the parcel fabric component, which allows you to go and analyze the lines and determine whether or not they're an extension of one line, and they should be set up to go and reflect what the overall dimension is on that or not. And it's called Reconstruct Parcels on here. Let's go and do this. And why is Reconstruct not on?
Is it because you don't have a record on?
You may in fact be correct, Christopher. Thank you. There you go. Yeah. So in here, well, you've already, it's basically done this already. It's gone and taken that and recognized that this was one line and gone and concatenated or added together these two values and reflected that they are in fact now recomputed. Excuse me, this is still from geometry, and it has given us not just a new line and a new bearing, but it's calculated which way it's going. So in this case, this bearing is going southeast and then southwest, and then let's southeast, or excuse me, southwest there, but it's recalculated. So this one line on the south here is northeast. This one is southwest. But when it calculated this, it calculated which way it was going. So this Reconstruct Boundaries, and thank you for reminding me, I had to have the parcel, and I think I have to have a record, I'm not sure, on there to actually have it go and recalc that. Now it's actually going and putting in there a new line. So it actually creates a new line in there. It goes and stores it to the record. I think I just answered my question. Stores it with the record. All right. and then goes and generates it and makes sure that it's valid on there. So let me go and just verify that hypothesis where I select all of those, everything that's associated with that record, and sure enough, there it is right there. So the reconstruct boundary allows us to go and make sure that all of our information for those lines, we don't have backlots anymore, and that it only goes and reflects what's actually part of that record that's in there. All right. I actually like that. The only downside to it that I don't really care about is the fact that there is no geoprocessing tool for it. So it individually has to go and analyze it as you're in the middle of edits to do that. But what that means is that, for example, if we go in here, I don't think I have one. Nope, I don't have one yet. So if I go in here and I go to do a combine, and let's go real quickly and create a new record for this. And then let's go and combine these two parcels. So we merge them together. All right, what this means is that, let's go ahead and merge it into here. Let's also make sure, and we can see that we've got multiple lines in here. All right, if I go and do a reconstruct boundary on here, it will go and reconstruct within a certain parameters for all of these on here. So it's gone and taken these two lines here, which are close, and added them up, but not done anything for this second one here. So when you're doing a combine now, let's go and see what it did up here. It went and replaced it with just one. So we have a good question here. Is this now reflecting an average of the bearings, or is it setting what, is it basically going and just approving those two and just making that line? Good question. I don't think it actually did the average, because if I undo this on here, all right, I actually have 8932.24, 8933. And if I go and redo this again, my new bearing is 8932.42. Oh, you might be right. You might be right. It might actually be giving you an average of those bearings. Again, this is from geometry. This is not right now. So what happens then? Let's go back here. And let's go back here and say, let's take these lines that we have, and let's mark them all as being entered. All right. Mark them all as being entered. Now let's go and reconstruct the boundaries and see what happens. And in fact, it is averaging the bearings on here. All right. And then the question is, what does it miss the intersection there? Well, let's go in there and see. Let's look at this a little bit further and see if in fact we have that, or if we actually have a bent line that it looks like it actually just bends that line is what it is. It puts a vertex in there. Let's go in and see that this line here. Let's only go and select that. And then let's go and edit the vertices. And in fact, it is a vertex that's being entered there. So it's not necessarily going and creating two lines and replacing it with one, but it looks like it's more like it's merging those two lines together and resetting the COGO values on them. Interesting, though. Interesting what it's actually doing. But again, a lot of it is them trying to go and get it so that we can begin to use labeling more and more on this. One of the things I didn't look at very much was that with my labeling, what happens if I do want to go and say, I don't want to see the bearing information or the direction information on here. Again, I can go in here and in my label expression, I can set that bearing as false, and then, and then just tell it to apply that, right? And you note, remember I said that we have 3 label classes now? So on the COGOType, it took the bearings out. Well, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to have to do that now on all 3 classes in order to make sure that it doesn't show the direction. All right. Come on. That's the shared one there. All right. So again, I have a lot more flexibility in here in what I'm doing with this. As far as labels and using labels, it's now allowing me to go and have control over tracking whether it's entered from geometry or whether it's calculated or computed. And it's showing me using the actual label that it puts up, what values those are coming from. So I can quickly see what can I depend upon and what can I not depend upon. And then it's also giving me better control over where I position these labels on here. One thing, and I'm looking at this here, one thing that if I look at this line here, I can see that this actually is centered on there, which means that the label expression is still actually putting something up here, but it's blank on here that is putting up there for the label expression. And so it's, when I say centered, it really is not centering the label as much as centering the expression, and the expression is still putting a blank for the direction instead of not just showing direction at all. So there's still some changes. It's not perfect, but it's a really good move towards that direction. Any questions or comments on this? We already have a comment regarding whether it's just putting the vertices in there. It's like, yeah, I don't like that, but that's all right.
No questions yet.
Okay. So here's basically going over those initial changes. Again, the biggest structural change is that it goes and adds the label position in there. And you want to make sure that when you're building this, you recognize that there is that new attribute field on all of your line feature classes, everything from your connection lines to all the various parcel types. It has it on there. So let's look at, there's another new function in there called Reconstruct from Seeds. Let's go ahead and look at that a little bit. So Reconstruct from Seeds, what it's supposed to do is allow you to go and rebuild a parcel. All right, so let me go in here and I can do Reconstruct from Seeds. Let's first shrink it to seeds and sort of see what happens on here. Let's also go and just show the record value, and we're still using that same record. So it's not going to help me here. Let's go in here and let's go back from shrink to seeds. Yep. So let's go in here. Let's do normally we'd do something like a copy lines 2, which would take the existing one, make it historic, and then allow you to go and use this. And when you go to build or reconstruct the boundary, you could either delete this line or you can replace the geometry on that line. Let's go ahead and go in here and say, let's replace the geometry for that line and go and just put some new geometry in here. All right, and then we could go and rebuild it. And it would go and rebuild it. Again, you notice the problem is that we now create gaps between them on here. But that was historically the way that we would do this if we wanted to go and do a reshape on here. What we now have is we now have this ability to go and shrink it to seeds. And again, shrink to seeds will go and capture that and shrink it back to seeds. I think I'm going to actually go and go back here and go to one that I actually have here and shrink that to seeds. All right, when I shrink it to seeds and only show my records, I now actually have all my lines that are part of it. Notice though, I only have 2 lines. Those 2 lines are the lines that I used for going and doing the reconstruct boundary, because this parcel actually has shared lines. Inside the parcel fabric, there's multiple ways in which you can have a line, and whether or not a line is shared between adjoining parcels or whether the line is actually unique to that parcel. It's one of the things that haven't been explored too much inside the parcel fabric, but it's a really interesting component of it. So for example, I'm going to undo this just so you can see. Undo this a little bit more and say do this. So if I look at that line itself, all right, this line in here, it actually has its own, it's associated with a record, but the record that it's associated with is this record up here. It's not associated with this record. So within the parcel fabric, there's 2 ways that lines can get associated. One, I'm going to create a new record here just so that we can play around with this for a little bit. If I create a single set of lines, all right, if I create a single set of lines and then create a new record in here and build this out, all right, this record, in fact, will have all the points associated with it, and it will have its own unique set of parcels lines on here, only related to that one, so that I have 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5 on here. I have 5 lines associated with this. However, if I do copy lines 2, it's going to mark that historic. But if I go in here and create some additional lines, or if I'm creating, for example, lots inside of a subdivision, all right, instead of each of these lines or each of these resulting parcels having their own set of lines, I go in here and create my seeds and then build these. They share the lines with that one single record. And this is sort of one of the unique things about the parcel fabric. The lines themselves are not associated with the parcels. The lines are associated with the records, so that one record that I have, I've created and I've associated all of those lines with it. All right, but the lines are not associated with the parcels. So you can have a line out here, a parcel that doesn't have lines associated with it. All right. So go in here. Let's look at this. Here's my points. Here's my lines. I have 19 lines all associated with this. These all associated with the one single record, not with the individual parcels. So you just want to be aware of it. And that is used for things that are, as surveyors, we call these sequential, or excuse me, we call these simultaneous conveyances. These are all built at the same time. So its simultaneous conveyance could be lots within a subdivision, or it can be something much larger than that, which we usually don't think of as being a simultaneous conveyance, but the public land survey system is an example of a simultaneous conveyance. Within a township, all the individual section lines are shared between the adjoining sections. So a township is sort of a big SIMCON. It's a big subdivision of lands. And then the sections inside all share the lines between them. It's the way it should be constructed, usually not, but the way it should be constructed is that way, so that the lines are shared between them. If in fact it's a sequential conveyance, if it's a tax parcel or a parcel type which is built off of some sort of unique deed, those are what's called sequential, so that the lines are only for that one record, only for that one document. So again, inside the parcel fabric, you have two different ways that lines can get associated with a parcel, because the lines are always associated with the record. Depends upon how you build the record. All right. Long way around discussing this, but what we were talking about was the reconstruct from seed, which is allow you to go and take and move it to a seed. Let's go back here. Let's select this one parcel. This parcel, we can tell it to go ahead and shrink to seed. It will go and shrink that. We could actually redefine the lines now between here, and then tell it to go ahead and reconstruct from seed. Since we're on the same record, it's fairly easy to do. One of the problems we had is that when we went and did a shrink to seed, yeah, I know that. When we did a shrink to seed, because it wasn't associating anything with the record, we often weren't doing that. We would say shrink to seed on this one, and it would have none of these lines were associated with the record that we have right now. So when we went to build, it wouldn't let us build them because we didn't have lines with the record. This reconstruct from seed is now allowing us to go and search out the lines that are adjacent to it and rebuild that from the seed. All right, so let's go in, and one more thing on here. It's not associating this with this record. It's just going and looking for lines out here and building them. Let's see one more time. We still have to have a record here to go and do that. So reconstruct from seeds allows us to go and rebuild a parcel without necessarily having all the lines be associated with one record. They can be shared lines, and it will go and build them for us. All right. Transfer parcels. This is something new inside of 3 that is actually a nice little tool. Let's see if we can show that. So let's go and create another record here. All right, so let's say I have this parcel, which is a road right-of-way abandonment. Now, I could have that stored on another parcel type. I might have it stored in a road parcel type or in a subdivision or on a abandoned road parcel type. I could have it stored on another parcel type. In this case, it's stored in the exact same one. But I just want to show you how this works. So we have a parcel. It is defined as a parcel. And remember, a parcel is defined inside the parcel fabric as being the polygon, the lines, the points, and the record. That's the parcel on here. So on here, I have a parcel that I've selected, and I'm going to go and run the transfer parcels. And the intent of the transfer parcels is to take a parcel that I have and go and transfer it and move it into another parcel type. And it does not delete the original one. So it just transfers it. So in this case, I'm going to transfer this on here and transfer from or the next. Let's just go and leave this. And I'm going to tell it to transfer it into these parcels here. So this is going to go and split that one and move them all into this parcel. So it went and took that road right away and basically added it to the parcels, but it did not delete or remove the one that I had created. Let's go back here one more time. Let's go back here, and I'm going to do this transfer parcel again. Here's the parcel I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to tell it which one will be clipped. And I can go in and clip it, and then which way I'm going to transfer it to. And in this case, the clip doesn't cover it. So let's remove this. Go back and say, go ahead and move it into this, and it will go and again, transfer it into those adjoining parcels. In this case, I still have that one first initial parcel that I created, only because for an example, I left it on the same parcel type, but I could have had it as a road right-of-way that was getting abandoned. Take that road right-of-way parcel and say, transferred into my tax parcels. And it could be a road abandonment on there. Could also be used for annexations. Could be used for a couple other things on there. So that's another. It's not really a split. It's not really a combine. Let's see if we can. That, by the way, is a combined component. Let's go and move this back. Let's take this parcel. Let's go and turn off our topology here for a minute. And let's just go and move that parcel. All right, let's move it to here. Let me undo this. Let me do this correctly. And let me go clear this out. Let me select this one. Let me go and activate the record. So I have an active record there. Now let me go and move this thing. All right. Do that. Let me go and build this record so it's a real record. All right, let me select this one parcel now. And now let me use transfer, because instead of adding it to the adjoining parcels, I'm actually going to be deleting it from that parcel. And now I select the parcels. It's going to be clipping it from there. and tell it to go ahead and transfer it to, maybe that's not it. Yeah, didn't do that right. I didn't do that right. So let's move on from there. Let's look again at the combine or the merge function. We want to go and take these, merge them in, and then tell it to go and reconstruct the boundaries. So it goes and adds these up on here. All right, so it adds those up in there. On a split, we want to go and make sure that we split it and then set our line location correctly. Let's go in here and let's create a new record. And let's do a copy lines 2. And let's just go and draw a line here. Create seeds and build this. Now, the one thing on here is we did not do any clips in here. We didn't do anything associated with that. But I'm just going to go and work through here. Updating the COGO. Let's make sure I don't have. Let's go in here. And why is it not doing that? I think I got stuck on, no. I think I've gotten stuck here. All right. So let's look at the next one. I went off at quite a rabbit hole there. Sorry about that. The next change inside of Pro that has to do with going in splits and combines is merge points. Let's see if I can merge points correctly here. Go to merge points. So on here, for example, this has got a line that's got an extra line in here. Now just for the sake of demonstrating this, I'm going to show you what merge points actually does. Merge points allows me to go and take 2 points that are close to one another and go and remove that point and take the line and actually go and merge it together. All right. That's merge points. Now, usually you won't have 27 feet of difference in there, but merge points allows you to go and do that and reset this in here. All right. Merge points is actually a very nice tool. It actually works really nicely now. But let's see if let's take this parcel here. Get off of merge points. Take this parcel, do a reconstruct boundary on here. Well, let's go in here and see what it did. It actually went and removed the lines and removed the point associated with that line on there for the reconstruct boundary. Now let's see if it actually did not mark them historic. It just went and removed them. So it did much the same thing as merge points did without having to go in there and rebuild all of those. Another change is that align features. When we do align features now, it actually goes and merges the points that are together. It doesn't necessarily put points on top of points. If you get points that are going to be on top of one another, it will automatically go and remove the excessive points and just make them 1 point instead. And then finally, let's look at the changes in the Traverse tool. So in the Traverse tool, one of the biggest changes is the fact that it's now much faster than it used to be. In fact, if I set a point here, and if I just go and previously it would take a while, and you could actually out type actually going in what this was doing. Now I can actually go, by the way, let me go and do this. It was one of the things I want you to look at is this up here, this outside record attempt, because now it actually is tracking and saying your record is far away from where you're actually inputting things into a new record. You're creating a multi-part record on here. Is that really what you were doing? And as I was typing this in, it actually was giving me this error message saying it's outside the current limits of your current record. Inside records now with 3.0, we have this option that will tell it to display a warning when we forget to create a new record on here. And we can tell it how far away we want it to be, a mile, a foot, kilometer, or a meter. In this case, this is just giving us a warning. It's not preventing us from doing it, but it's giving us a warning saying we're creating things outside the current record. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.